This is Kristen.
And this is Steve, and you were listening to Cycling Together, a show all about bikes, riding, and riding together. So we have a show today that's, we're going to probably be recurring this topic, returning to this topic many times.
I want to call it something inflammatory.
And
like the trouble with e-mountain bikes.
Yeah, and this one always stirs up controversy, and it's gonna certainly stir ourselves up here.
Yeah, I'm excited. So we're going to talk about e-bikes, e-mountain bikes in particular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, e-mountain bikes.
Do you remember the first time we saw e-mountain bikes?
You know, in the wild.
In the wild, not in an industry
It's not
magazine.
like I didn't know it was there. What was that? But I'd say in the wild, yeah, it was for our anniversary trip to Switzerland.
Which was what year?
2018.
2018.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in Zermatt.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And they used them all over town because there's no cars in Zermatt.
Correct.
I think you're right. So there's no cars. We had to leave our car and take a train in.
Right.
And so they were using these e-mountain bikes. You know, it was like a mountain bike with the battery, like you could see it. You could on the down tube.
Yeah, it was either on the down tube or on the rear rack.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess there were some. And so they used them all over town.
Mm-hmm.
And then we saw, I will never forget seeing a couple. We were headed down a dirt road type thing in Zermatt.
Mm-hmm.
And here come these two mountain bikers just boop, 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 boop. And that was the first time. I mean, obviously, I wasn't reading any of the industry publications. So I will admit it wasn't even on my radar.
Yeah, I think it was a little more shock to you.
It was much more shocking to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I also thought, well, that's cool. It was very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So fast forward to today. And we were having a conversation with a friend about group rides and how there seemed to be more and more e-bikes showing up at group rides. And
yes, he leads a mountain bike ride.
Right, a group
and
ride.
He was a little shocked at how many e-bikes were showing up to this ride.
Yeah. Shocked.
Surprised.
Shocked.
Yeah.
And the conversation we got into was, do e-bikes beget more e-bikes?
Mm-hmm. And do they change the ride?
Do they change the ride? Yeah. And then you found an article, completely forgetting that we were going to be talking about this.
Yeah, 2 days ago. I think it just came out.
Right.
Yep.
But you sent me an article that was titled, "Should We All Just Submit to Our E-Mountain Bike Future" in Outside Magazine.
Yeah.
So before we get into it, let's unpack our biases.
Yeah.
Because we have them.
Yeah, we do.
So first of all, as a shop, we don't sell them.
We don't.
Why
or
don't
service
we
them.
sell or service them?
No, I don't.
No, I know
them.
you don't. I'm just trying to figure out how to break that down. Let's start with why you don't sell them.
Why don't sell them?
Right, because you have manufacturers that you work with that do sell them.
Right.
And you have chosen not to.
Right.
Why?
Because the insurance is really expensive.
Okay.
And the reason behind that is the battery fires that have been happening.
Right.
Right. So, and then
we should talk about that in a second.
And then you need a new special fireproof cabinet to store the batteries in.
What do you do if the battery doesn't come out of the bike? Because a lot of them don't come out of the bike anymore.
You're right.
Do you
Not
need
easily.
Like a
You're
whole
right.
Fireproof room for
so
them?
that's exactly
Okay.
why insurance is expensive.
Okay. They're heavy.
They're heavy.
They're heavy. So you need a different stand.
Yep. I would need a motorized lift stand.
Right.
Which in itself is heavy, and I don't think the floor of my shop
And your shop is melting.
would hold 100. Like now you're concentrating the weight, right? So I don't know if it would hold that 100+ pound motorized stand with a 75-pound bike, lifting up on that. Yeah,
right, which is also why you don't service them. I mean, there is the whole bikes that are not coming from, we'll say non-bike shop brand e-bikes, which are its own cluster, to unpack. But you don't have the equipment to do it. It's not, it's hard on your body. They're heavy.
Right.
If you sold them, what would you sell? How would you decide what to sell?
I would only sell brands that are using probably Shimano or Bosch motors.
Okay.
Just because those motors are very well supported.
Yeah.
The parts are available. I think that they will have longevity in terms of having parts available. And there are so many e-bikes out there that basically have no support for their motors, or just generic motors. Now, there's a couple other of known branded motor companies out there, and they are up and coming, and they would probably be fine, actually.
It is the Wild West on batteries. And in fact, it's going to get worse, not better, because even as the industries have been pushing for standards with
Then we
the
should just
with the consumer,
we should
the
just
CPSC.
yeah, we should just tell we need to say this. We need to say what just happened.
Right. So
there was a 5-panel on the Consumer Product Safety Commission.
Yep.
And
There were 5 people on the panel.
and they voted 3-2 to create basically battery standards.
Which organizations like the National Bicycle Dealers Association has been pushing hard for.
Yes.
And should be. I mean, there have been bike shops in New York City that have gone up in flames and taken entire blocks with it.
And killed people.
So, okay, go ahead.
So what happened was the administration fired those 3 people.
Fired the 3 Democrats that were on the 3 Democrats that voted for it, that were on the committee.
Yep.
They fired.
And so now there's only 2 left. So those 2 just said, okay, now there's the 2 of us can vote. So we will vote for no standards, Wild West.
Yes.
Government should not have regulations.
This is not a political statement that we're making.
No.
It's a safety statement that the CPSC, did I get that right, is reducing oversight on a variety of things.
Right.
And the batteries are a big piece of it. And I do have concerns about, in general, the cheaper e-bikes and people bringing them into their homes and their homes bursting into flames.
And this would have begun to solve that problem, and now it's going to probably get worse.
Fantastic.
And so, and the other thing is that I think there needed to be more of a standard for putting batteries into bikes, the connection point to the motors.
Yep.
And if there was a standard there, then we wouldn't have every company making their own battery system. And so that is what a lot of e-bikes become obsolete quickly, because companies stop making the battery for that bike. So even in just a matter of a few years, sometimes if your battery goes bad and you need to get a replacement, we don't make that battery anymore.
Right.
We change the connection point. So therefore, there's no battery out in the market anymore that will connect into your motor, right? Or connect into the frame, which connects to the wiring, which connects to the motor.
Goes bad, that's an issue. You had a bike in the shop that had a bad battery, and you were telling me what would be involved. This was a road bike, but you were telling me what would be involved to dig that thing out of the frame.
In that particular case, it was inside the frame on a road bike. And I had to do it once before, and it's a 5-6 hour job that involves a lot of swearing.
You get the swearing for free. Yep. Okay, so that's our first bias number 1. We don't sell them for a variety of reasons. It is technology that's moving very, very fast. So that's why you're seeing a lot of the changes. Right. And again, it's unregulated. I mean, look how long it took for us to get a USB-C on all of our phones. And that was only because the European Union made Apple do it. Yeah. But I've been carrying around lightning cables for the last 15 years. So, okay. Then let's talk about our attitudes about it. We don't ride them. we're going to ride them someday. I mean,
Probably.
when NEMBA was taking a hard stance against e-mountain bikes during the pandemic in particular, right? And they were saying to you and all the other bike shops, just don't sell them. Just don't sell e-bikes, which was so ridiculous. We said we would rather NEMBA advocate for and protect the trails from e-bikes and for e-bikes than to have a completely separate, because someday we too may want to ride e-bikes. But we don't right now. And I have to say, I definitely still feel like this feels a little like the conversation I'm having with people about AI and all the people that keep saying to me, well, you just have to accept it and adopt it and it's going to take over everything. And I'm just railing against the overutilization of this technology. And it feels a little like that.
Well, you see and you show me all of the issues that it has.
Right. I just think with mountain biking, we had an interview with Jackie.
Yes.
And she said in her interview, as we were talking about why she got into why she got into mountain biking, she liked it because it was hard. And that's what I like about mountain biking. I'm not looking for it to be easier.
No.
I may get there. So that's my bias. I know my bias is in play.
Yeah.
But I definitely, and I know I have friends too, where I'll see someone on an e-mountain bike and I'll go, you don't need that. What are you doing? You don't need that. And that's me. That's my
headspace. It is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm going to make a lot of people mad with this comment, but here we are in May, and I get to this point in the spring on my mountain bike where no matter how hard I push, I cannot push my legs hard enough. They don't fatigue. My lungs can't. My cardiovascular can't necessarily keep up
this problem,
but I cannot get my legs to fatigue. Now, if I'm out for a 3-hour ride, yes. But if we're talking, 10, 15 mile mountain bike ride, right? And when I get to that point, it's just great, right? And because it takes some time on this every spring to get to that point.
Yes, yeah. It's we're back on the bikes. We're getting our legs back. We're getting our lungs back. Maybe we did some work in the basement. Maybe we didn't. But it does. So to take a step back, you sent me this article. Should we all just submit to our mountain bike future? It was from Outside Magazine. And some of the things that were said in it were, this year, Santa Cruz Bicycles expects to sell more e-mountain bikes than pedal bikes. Specialized Turbo Levo model has been its top selling mountain bike for years, and Cannondale has more e-mountain bikes in development than analog. Industry-wide, bike shops still sell more pedal bikes than e-mountain bikes, but product managers from the brands above believe e-bikes will soon represent more than half the bikes on the trail.
Yeah, and that just, I know, half the bikes on the trail. Right? It's just, and
it's a moment for me.
If they were all class 1.
Okay, well, let's take let's dig into e-bikes for a little bit.
Okay.
Let's take a step back.
Yeah.
What are the differences? Oh, I had those great printouts. Wonder where they went. Okay. What are the differences between a class 1, a class 2, and a class 3 e-bike?
Class 1 is the most common.
Okay.
Class 1 means pedal assist. The motor does not activate unless you are pedaling.
Yes.
And you can usually choose the boost amount, though.
Yeah.
And the maximum speed is 20 miles per hour. At that point, you can go faster, but the motor kicks out.
And we're not just talking about e-bikes. This is road bikes, too. And the reason that reminded me of when one of my PMC teammates' fathers, who is in his 70s, got an road bike. And he and I were riding, and he's like, Kristen is great. I can go so fast. And I said, yeah, but it's a class 1 road bike. So it's not going to boost you more than 20. No, I can go so much faster. I was like, yes, you can go faster when you're going downhill, but you cannot go faster under pedal assist than, I think it's actually 19. And he's like, nope. So anyway, we hit a hill.
Yes.
We're going up a hill.
Yep.
And I just take off. Because I'm just like, I know what you're saying, but it's important that you understand what you have as a bicycle.
Well,
you can go 30 miles an hour downhill.
Sure.
Absolutely.
He was getting up to speed faster, and in his head, that meant that he was
faster.
Just faster.
I'm such a dream crusher. It was really funny to have that conversation. But there's no throttle. It's just, I equate it almost just not entirely accurate, a moving sidewalk. Like you're moving just a bit faster. You're walking, but you're more efficient when you're walking.
Right. A moving sidewalk is a good way to
That's
put
how
it.
I always think of that, because I did have an step through commuter bike that I used for a little bit. And you rode it home once. You got home and you're like, that is the worst bicycle ever. And I said, because you tried to ride it like you normally ride a bike.
Yeah.
And this step through commuter bike was meant to be ridden in my jeans, right? So I always said safely, efficiently, and not that sweaty. But you tried to boost it past its 20, and it was heavy. It did not like to go past its.
Right.
I do 20 miles an hour.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, anyway.
All right. So class
that's
2.
Class 1. So class 2.
Class 2 is the same thing, but with a throttle. So you don't have to pedal at all. You can just twist the throttle and the bike will go. It is basically an e-scooter, in
Why
many
are
ways.
we calling that a bicycle then?
Because it's still a bicycle. It could be the exact same bike of the same one with class 1, but it has a throttle.
Okay.
All right. It's still, but the same limitation with 20 miles per hour.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's important.
Okay. Yep.
Got it. All right.
And then class 3 is pedal assist, just like class 1. Except that its maximum speed is 28 miles per hour.
Okay. So
Now,
no throttle.
No throttle. Nope. Pedal
Okay.
assist, 28 miles per hour. A class 3, if I were to get a commuter bike,
Yes.
right, I would get a class 3 because I find the limitation of 20 miles per hour too slow.
Yeah. I can see that.
And so I tell people that if you're getting a commuter bike, look for a class 3. Now that class 3's that speed is illegal in Europe, which is why a lot of companies either don't make it or they don't make they have a couple models that are class 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
None of these are gas powered. There's no such thing as
no.
gas powered. What is the thing that kid is riding in the woods that it sounds like a little gas powered? It's a bicycle. It's a scooter. I don't know what it is.
Well, there were old gas-powered kits you could throw onto bicycles, and yeah.
Okay.
That was...
Every now and then you see a kid like banging through the woods on something. They're like, it's not a BMX. It's not a scooter.
Oh, well,
it's not a...
All right, now...
What is it?
Now you get into... There's this class of I don't even want to call them bicycles. I think there's a company called Super 77. I believe they're actually now out of business because of
lawsuits.
And they were essentially motorcycles that they would put pedals on so that they could skirt around regulations and call it an e-bike. And a lot of e-bikes that don't have these branded motors or these by like Shimano and Bosch, who do all sorts of research and development and engineering into their motors and so forth. They have restrictions. If you try to tinker, in fact, Shimano has one thing. If you try to go in and tinker with it and make and get rid of the speed limit, it bricks the motor. You have a dead bike.
Good job, Shimano.
But a lot of just generic hub motors, you can defeat those speed limitations.
Okay.
And you can boost the wattage of and so forth. So that's where you can get these bikes that can go 40, 50 miles an hour.
And you added something too. So I have a Surly commuter bike.
Mm-hmm.
That was not an e-bike.
Right.
But you added a powered hub to it called the Switch.
The Switch. Yep.
And is
Switch
that
with a
the
Y.
equivalent of a class 1?
Mhm.
Because there's no...
Yep, it
No
is
throttle.
pedal assist.
Yes.
It has a sensor, so the motor only kicks in when you're pedaling.
Yep.
You can change the boost level.
Yep.
And then the motor stops adding boost after 20 miles per hour. And you're right, a lot of these companies will not want to push up against that speed restriction, so they might cut out at around 18, 19 miles per hour.
The Scott was 19, definitely.
it
The
definitely
step
was.
through that I had, I definitely never saw it hit 20 unless I was actively pushing it into a 20 mile. It was not helping me get there. I mean, there's a lot of reasons mountain bikes are awesome, right? There's a lot of reasons to ride one.
So, I mean, commuter bikes, love.
Yes.
They're awesome. E-mountain bikes, yeah, this is where my feelings completely change.
Completely change because I have definitely ridden behind people on an e-bike and thought they needed that bike. I didn't. We had a great ride.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. I have a friend who had some issues with her foot. She is on an e-mountain bike.
Yeah, it's not the existence of them.
Yeah.
It is the amount of people who do not need one getting one.
I think, right. So let's talk about some of the concerns people have. Let's break them down. And we're going to this is like science versus. We're not going to bring our bias into this, right? So one of the concerns people have is that they ruin the trails.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think initially that was because they were heavy or they were too fast or take off.
They're still heavy. I think there were I think some of this is the throttle, the class 2s, the throttles.
Yes.
And it's just like a motorcycle. You can then spin out that rear wheel and damage the trail that way.
But most of the trails around us, it's class 1 only. I don't think class 2s are, if they're allowed. But how do you police it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Unless somebody chases you
allowed,
down.
yes. But that doesn't mean anybody is going to
Right.
obey that restriction.
Unless they're chased down by somebody.
Right.
But it turns out that the weight is not so much the issue. I guess the concern is more that people can ride for longer. And so so we're going to have heavier trail usage.
You brought this up the other day.
I didn't bring it up as much as I learned about it on Science Direct.
Well, yeah. Okay. So, and this is something I hadn't really thought about. And then when you told me about this, I said, oh, that makes complete sense. You have more people who wouldn't otherwise go as far out into the trails that they would have.
Right.
Now they're on an e-bike and now they're riding more miles on the trails, going further into the trail system than they would have. And that is leading to a much greater trail impact than we had seen in the past.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, IMBA had a study in 2015 that concluded class 1 e-bikes are not likely to have any more impact than traditional mountain bikes or other trail users.
Yeah, I think. Yep.
But increased trail uses and population growth in general will serve as a challenge to resources that we all must contend with. So.
And I think in 2015, I think it was a little too early. I think that there wasn't enough on the ground observation yet to see.
It was a few years.
Yeah, real life situations.
Right.
And I'm already seeing this. So I think we might have talked about this in the past, Strava lines, where if you have a windy, twisty trail that all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but over time, a couple people start going straight instead of that zigzag around a tree, they start going straight.
Right.
And it used to be called Strava lines because they were looking. Strava doesn't pick up that difference between zigging around.
Oh, it doesn't. It doesn't say, "Oh, you fell off. You fell off the
course." No,
so,
you're still right. That's the GPS is not accurate enough for that. So they gained a couple seconds to sort of try to get the king of the mountain and so forth. And so these sort of straightened trails formed in a few places where they could.
Okay.
But now I'm seeing in places where that just hasn't happened, all of a sudden I'm seeing that happening where I believe this is now from e-mountain bikes. And I believe it's because they're heavy and they're powered. And I believe that in some cases they're pushing. Yes. And it's especially more evident on some descents where you'd have this sort of twisty technical descent. And honestly, if I can't say for certain because I haven't ridden a very heavy e-mountain bike down these sections, but I am now seeing new straightened lines forming that haven't formed in decades in some cases. And all of a sudden they're starting to, and I believe it's because e-mountain bikes are starting to just smash their way down.
There
straight.
is concern, and we're going to talk about group rides next. There is concern that some of these bikes are so heavy that the people riding them cannot handle them. And I don't necessarily even mean in the capacity that you're talking about it. Can they get them off their car? Can they get them over a log? Can they carry them over the log? Because they're very, very heavy.
Right.
I mean, I'm at the point where I'm trying to get my bikes lighter.
Yeah, we have tight single track in our area. And in some cases, very dense brush. And when a tree falls across the trail, I mean, in some cases, like a huge tree.
And it can be a foot off the ground.
Not a foot.
Or two.
Like that, you can't go under, you have to go over the 3-4 feet.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's no way around.
Right.
Not without really bushwhacking. And in some cases, just the thorns and so forth like that. So you just have to lift your bike up and over.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you need to be able to lift your e-bike up basically as high as your head and then down over the backside of another tree. If you can't do that, you need to, that's not appropriate for around here.
That might not be the right e-bike for you.
Right.
I mean, they're not all the same. You should, just like any other bike, test it for these different things.
Sure.
But you probably wouldn't. I know that I would not necessarily think while buying a bike, I wonder if I can lift this over something.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, and I also, this is also on my plan list this year is sort of if we can find some to test ride at some of our events.
Should,
because we also have a lot of technical rock features around here where you really have to get your bike up some serious rock outcrops.
Yep.
And I'm interested to see how it's.
Well,
and it's not power; it's technique, it's finesse.
Some of it's
a
power,
half
technique,
stroke of power, and then more pushing, and then a half stroke of power. And how is it going to be with a bike that's 3 times the weight of my current bike?
There are definitely people I've ridden with on e-bikes that they're getting up stuff they just wouldn't have had the power to get up.
Mm-hmm.
And then
in terms of just straight climbs,
just straight climbs. I totally see it. Yeah. But you're right. There's going to be we should definitely. We're signed up for Flow State. They had demo bikes last year.
We can try the
demo bikes.
The Turbo Levo.
Yeah, we absolutely should, because it's easy to be judgy.
I mean, I've ridden these things, but I think
Have you?
Absolutely. But I need to get them more into the technical trails than I have before.
I rode an e-mountain bike at a Jam Fund Grand Fondo dinner. They had one in the field, and we could just like tootle around.
Oh my gosh, at that dinner,
that?
I do.
Yeah, I just talk about a memory. But we're still talking 10 years ago, maybe more. So now let's get to the really tricky part. Are e-bikes ruining the vibe of group rides? And there was another article. This one was from cyclingweekly.com. The title was E-Bikes Are Not the Enemy, Why E-Bikes Deserve a Place on Group Rides and Bike Races. I'm going to leave that one, bike races, alone. So what they said is some argue that e-bikes could disrupt group rides by encouraging riders to charge ahead. While this concern is valid, performance-oriented rides, most group rides are about building community, exploring, and enjoying the ride. E-bikes can help equalize the effort level within group rides, making it possible for mixed ability groups to ride together without the pressure of keeping pace or fear of holding others back. Rather than excluding e-bikes, we should encourage their participation by setting clear community expectations and recognizing them as a valuable tool. And here's the thing. I don't disagree with them.
I like that last sentence there.
Right. The problem we're running into now. So we've all been on mountain bike rides where someone on an e-bike gets to the bottom of a hill and just goes slamming past you, and you just kind of go, ugh, e-bike. And maybe a little jealous, maybe a little. But for the most part, when I have gone on group rides with e-bike riders, I have not had any significant problems. I really haven't. They have been polite. We talked about flow state last year, right? People would just be behind us. I haven't had a lot of people pushing me too far. There are a couple of etiquette things I think that happen because they forget they're on an e-bike. My favorite is they stop in the middle of a hill, a climb.
Yes.
And they forget that they can start wherever, but they jam up everybody else.
Right.
And I can't necessarily start in the middle of a hill.
Yep.
Because I'm not an e-bike. So that's kind of a remember the bike you're on. The challenge is it starting to feel like, are people buying e-bikes because other people have e-bikes and we're going to end up in the minority?
I feel like that's happening a lot. You know what I mean? I feel like that's the trend that's happening.
The future, right? Like
Yes.
It hasn't happened a lot. I've been on a couple of group rides locally that do have a pretty big e-bike contingent.
I mean, like people going in. I think people are now are bike. I think it's happening a lot that people are bike shopping, saying, "Oh, maybe I'll get an e-bike instead because
what is the
this
price
guy and this
difference?
guy and this guy's."
What is the price difference? Let's talk. Say we sell Scott, and what is the difference between, say, I don't even know if these are bikes that. Is there a Scott Contessa Genius e-bike? Like, what is the e-bike? Oh, it's the Voltage. The Volt. What do they call the Scott e-bike? Scott e-mountain bike.
Oh, there's a couple different names, so we won't necessarily get into that. But they are a few thousand more. Well, let's say 1,000 to 3,000 more than the equivalent non-e-bike.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a
lot of money.
It's not a no-brainer.
Yeah.
My other concern is, are we making it that much harder to enter the sport if e-bikes are the de facto bike?
I think so.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then what do we do about children? So all the parents are
Right.
going to be e-bikes and the kids are going to be they're already on the heaviest bikes on the hill.
Yeah, and you know, when I do get kids stopping by on their Amazon e-bikes often, you know, and
Those scare me.
They do. It's a little disappointing that this, you know, 12-year-old has this sort of e-bike.
That it doesn't
for just bopping around town.
It doesn't disappoint me. They worry me because I've seen too many stories of kids getting hurt on e-bikes because they're moving faster than they should be. I don't know if the helmets are rated for e-bike use, right?
Right, the impacts will now become greater because the speed is greater.
So I have concerns about that. And I have concerns that these are inexpensive e-bikes with bad batteries that are going to burn down their house. Yeah. Those are the three things.
Well, my thing is always the brakes. The brakes are never up to... they're not good enough for a pedal bike, let alone an e-bike.
Right.
Yeah.
This is where I go back to why it feels so familiar to my conversations about AI, because my concerns about AI is that, for example, we're not hiring entry-level computer programmers because AI is going to do it.
Yep.
Which means we don't have anyone who's learning the fundamentals, who then in the future will be the supervisors.
Right.
We have AI taking the place of writers and artists. And so at some point, where are going to be the writers and the artists? I have real concerns. And we've reached a point now where people will say, oh, well, I asked AI and this is what they told me, or this is what they wrote. And I thought, when did we get proud of that? When did we get proud of not doing the work ourselves?
Right.
And this is why I guess this conversation makes me a little grumpy, because it feels the same for bikes, right? We're going to gut the entry level bike market. We're going to make it that much harder for people to get into mountain biking.
It's going to become a point where everybody, a bike is now an e-bike almost.
Right, which is why I hate that headline. Should we all submit to our e-mountain bike future? Of course we shouldn't.
Right.
Of course we should not.
And it's not only that the bike costs more. I just read an article right before we started recording.
Yeah.
About bike shops, and it was written for bike shops in terms of embracing the e-bike service and all the stuff you can do. And let me tell you, and they're more complicated and so forth, but I think people need to be prepared that your e-bike is now going to almost be like a car with car-like repair bills and more frequent servicing because of the wear that happens on the chain and the brake pads and so forth.
Right.
So it is not only the cost of the bike itself, it is significantly higher repair bills.
Right. And I really don't want to leave this on a total crapping on e-mountain bikes.
No.
I do believe there are wonderful use cases for e-mountain bikes. I have seen them.
Yes.
I have friends who are able to ride areas they haven't been able to ride. They are able to keep up with their spouses. They're able to overcome injury. They are able to access areas that maybe they couldn't. There is a downside to that in that you could potentially get yourself into a place you shouldn't be as a rider. But I really don't want to leave this as we hate e-mountain bikes.
Not at all.
We don't. I hate the idea that they are going to become the de facto.
Yes.
Right? I'm already grumpy.
They should. They're because the person that they are ideal for is not the common person, and I should say not
the average rider, the
everyday rider.
Still grumpy. You got me a new dropper post and it needs a battery, and that makes me a little grumpy because if the battery dies or something, like I'm trying to go more analog.
Well, I am all in on the electronic shifting.
I do like it.
I love it.
But I joke
love
every time we don't have a battery or a battery dies, you're like, bikes used to be so simple. Just got on the bloody bike and it went, right? I mean, remember?
I see just as many issues with cable actuated things. I see more cable actuated problems than electronic.
I believe that to be true, but still every now and then I just kind of want to say, I want a bike that will work if there's a zombie apocalypse and I have no more power left.
Right.
That's what I think we all need to at least have a bike that'll do that. Because the other thing is I was reading on my mountain bike ladies group, there was someone and she said she was on her e-bike and her e-mountain bike and she was climbing. I can't think of what the name of it was. And it just stopped. It just stopped. And now she's in the middle of a climb, no battery, no movement. The thing is too bloody heavy for her to go anywhere. I think she was able to, she said, do a Fonzie and reboot it and get it back going. But I thought, don't want that happening to me. If anything fails, I want it to be my legs.
Should we talk about just a little bit more about
etiquette?
No, the group rides. The mixed group rides.
I think we should talk about. Let's say we're going to do mixed group rides. We don't want to separate. I don't want to reach a point where we're saying it might happen.
It might happen.
It might happen, right? This is women's ride for analog bikes. Fine. But let's say for now we're going to mix them. What are some ways that e-mountain bikers and mountain bikers can get along and ride together nicely?
So I think that that one part you read from that article is, so rather than excluding e-bikes, we should encourage their participation by setting clear community expectations. And I think that right there, the clear community expectations, a sort of general knowledge among all the riders of what the etiquette is between e-mountain bikers and analog riders.
So what would be some of your expectations? What would you want to communicate?
Don't ride up
my
butt.
Don't ride up my butt.
Yeah.
You're still under the I am still the rider in front, which means I still have the right of way, which means I may stop unexpectedly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just general etiquette. I mean, that's e-bike etiquette. It's not just e-bike. That is
general etiquette. Yeah, that is general etiquette. But, but do regular riders do we need to have an unrealistic expectation about e-mountain bikers because of their issues? And I say this almost like, okay, let's say like there's a really difficult climb on the Friday morning ride.
Okay.
That I do. And it's not everybody's going to make it.
Okay.
I don't even make it every single time.
Got
right? It is how wet is it out?
Mm-hmm.
Which line did I take? That kind of thing. And if you go up and you're climbing and it is technical and very, very steep and you stop, you're not going to make it. You put the foot down. But there's people behind you.
Yes.
You need to pull that bike off the trail immediately, so you do not wreck the line. Right. So at least they have the shot at it.
Got to give each other space and grace.
I don't think pulling off. Sometimes pulling your e-mountain bike off the trail, like literally lifting it and yanking it off the trail in a second. That's not as easy, but should we have that expectation that an e-mountain biker can do that?
I'm going to say yes, we should. And that, I think, is where we get into the bike itself and making sure that you can move your bike.
Yeah.
Because that's just etiquette. Yep. Like, I'm going to get stuck. Say I get stuck on that climb.
Right.
I'm going to get out of the way as quickly as possible. I'm not going to go, I don't have to. The guy behind me's got an e-bike. He's going to make it up no matter what. That would be rude.
Oh,
this
is so technical that the e-bike is
but I'm just saying,
but it's not a.
I'm just saying, but I wouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say, like you talked about on a past show, someone climbing behind you and you said, well, I'm going to pull and let them pass because they're just doing hero's work here.
Yeah.
And then when he passed, you said, oh, it's an e-bike. I don't think the bike matters in etiquette from the standpoint of you probably shouldn't have stopped climbing. Mm-hmm. You should keep climbing regardless of who's behind you. And then, as always, it is the person behind you, their responsibility to tell you they're there and to make the pass when it's safe, regardless of bicycle. And so I think the same can be said for all of these things, right? The rules aren't any different, but it is on all of us, regardless of type of bike, that would be able to get that thing out of the way. So that's why you want to make sure your bike's not too big. Your bike's not too heavy. I didn't say e-bike. Your bike has to fit you. Your bike has to be something you can manipulate. You want to be able to get it on your own car, right? You want to be able to e-bike because there's some hella heavy mountain bikes.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And you can have someone who ends up with a bike that's too heavy for them, regardless of whether it's an e-bike.
Right.
So,
there's some 60, 70 pound e-mountain bikes, and there are also 25, 30 pound ones.
Yeah. I mean, let me say, I'm sure that there's someone out there who has had a ride with e-bikes where the rider is riding up their ass, giving them trouble, heckling them. We just haven't had that situation.
No.
And I would be, so obviously that would not be acceptable. But it also would be the same as when I do the Friday night ride and there's a whole group ahead of me and you're pulling away and I'm just making my way up the hill. And I always say to the guys, pass me if you can. This is the pace I'm going. And they're always very polite. It would be, the challenge is going to be when you become the minority as the analog rider.
Yeah.
And say you're in that scenario I just said, and everybody's like, whoop, 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 whoop past you.
Right. And and especially if there's not a lot of technical that can somewhat level the playing field.
Yeah.
Then yes, you're right, because then now all of a sudden, if you're the minority, they could be taking off on you.
Right. Yeah, the articles I read about
and now they're waiting for you. Right.
The articles I read about etiquette too with e-bikes were like, make sure your battery's charged. Yep, you should do that. But again, I should make my shifter batteries charged. How many times have we gone out and that hasn't been charged? We talked about remembering you do have a slight advantage. So again, if you're going to stop on a hill, because you can restart,
right?
Maybe get out of the way because the next people can't. Mm-hmm. But I actually don't think it's that complicated.
From what I hear from most people, they don't like mixed bike group rides.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. The vibe seems to be off. So I think that is something that I'm going to pay a little more attention to.
I think we have to pay attention to it. I've been on rides with a lot. Let me say, anytime I've been on a ride where I didn't think the vibe was great, it wasn't because of the bicycles.
Mm-hmm. No, right. Yeah.
It had nothing to do with the bikes.
Well, the riders are the vibe, but you're right.
But it wasn't, as I said, I've ridden with many e-mountain bikers. I think some of it is in our own heads. And if you're going to be an analog rider, a contrarian, you got to lean into that, my friend, right? This is who I am. This is the bike I ride. Over on LinkedIn, I am the AI curmudgeon.
Right.
I ran into a professional last week, very smart guy, older gentleman, and he said to me, so Kristen, using a lot of AI at work? And I thought, oh, you are not following me on LinkedIn. So I think like all things, it has its place, but some of this is our own stuff.
Yeah.
Like as an analog rider, you kind of have to, you got to just, this is my choice and I'm not going to be bullied.
Right.
I'm not going to be bullied by the stupid articles like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the industry. Let me just say that too. It's not the riders. It's the industry. I feel more pressure from the industry to deal with e-bikes than I do from any individual rider.
Part of you're part of this with the industry is it's another different new bike to sell. Mm-hmm. And we quickly mentioned a few weeks ago about the 32-inch wheels. And we're going to revisit that in a coming episode. But it just comes down to industry needing something different to sell.
Shiny thing syndrome. We would love to know what you think. That's what I'm going to say.
Yes.
I would love to know what people think. I would like your good rides, your rides where maybe the vibe was off. What do you think the rules should be? Are e-bikes the future? And I'm just yelling into the wind again.
Exactly. Yeah, I really want to know what people think about this right now. And I'm going to say my opinions are going to, I think, constantly change and evolve with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can email us, info@stevethebikeguy.com. You can leave a comment. You can even send a text message through our podcasting apps, which is crazy. So I would like to know. Okay. And then I think we need to get on some.
Great.
Set up some demos.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're back. Maybe someday we'll have like commercials and stuff.
Ooh.
Should put in commercials.
Bougie.
Bougie. All right. You have a scene while scrolling.
I do. Yes, I saw a link to an article about cross chaining, which was on road.cc. And so I thought, you know what? That's actually a really good topic to just touch upon. So cross chaining, just to recap that.
Sure.
Or to
explain it. Got it.
Is when you are now this is with a 2x, so you have 2 or 3 chain rings up front, And so you would say being your big ring up front and your big cogs in the back. So the chain is forced to be at an angle from the front chain ring.
At its most extreme.
It's most extreme.
Okay.
Or in the small chain ring in the front and the small cogs in the back. Okay.
Yep.
That is cross chaining, and it has forever been considered bad. Right. And this article's titled, "Is Cross Chaining Really That Bad? Find out what Shimano and SRAM have to say."
Okay.
So I will just say my own personal thought for the past
let's start with
decades here. Okay. Is that no. Like run it, like if you have it, run it. There's an exception to this, and that is the small chain ring up front and the small cogs in the back. And the only reason for that is that it's less efficient. Okay, because
it's dumb.
the tighter the chain the smaller the cogs, or the smaller the chain rings, the tighter the chain has to go around it. The tighter, like the links have to roll across each other more.
Yeah.
And so therefore there's more friction there, so it's less efficient. And also because most front derailleurs don't have the capacity to handle that, and so there's a little bit of rub there. So it's more of an annoyance.
Before you get into what Shimano and SRAM say, what is the conventional wisdom on why it's bad?
Oh, just because the chain is not at its optimal angle. It is wearing out your chain more. It's wearing out your chain rings harder. It's wearing out. This was always a thing. I mean, this has been around since the 60s, 70s type of situation. Don't cross chain. It's bad. Never be in that gear.
Extended.
Oh,
right?
no.
Like
there would be articles about just never be in that gear and so forth.
Well, I think you can probably guess what I think of that, because anytime you would say to me, well, if I was having trouble with something, you'd be like, well, just don't shift into that gear. I'm like, I want to use all of them and I don't want to think about it.
Right.
That was always that's generally my, if you guys didn't want me to use them, you shouldn't have given them to me.
That was sort of a little bit of the philosophy behind my thought, but at the same time, it's also just, you're not doing all that much difference to not use that gear.
Like you would have to stay in that cross-chained position for miles for it to make any kind of...
Yes.
I mean, I guess if you live somewhere flat, that could happen. But since I shift like it's going out of business...
And let's be clear, like if you have a one-by, right?
Yes.
You still can have extreme chain angles between that single front chain ring and your cogs in the back. But there is no such thing as cross-chaining on a one-by. You're supposed to use every cog in the back.
You say that, but bike... I did look this up before we got... Because I thought, I might as well know a little something. And Bike Radar... just last month posted an article. Cross chaining is a common cycling mistake, and this is why you should avoid it.
See?
And they actually said that you can cross chain a one by.
Well, in this article, SRAM says, SRAM says there is no cross chaining on one by.
Yeah. Well, SRAM said there's literally no such thing as cross chaining with a one by, but Bike Radar's like, I mean, there kind of is, though, because you don't want to be... basically, they're saying don't use the extremes of your cassette if you have a one-by. Like, how would you not...
You have to. That's the whole point of a one-by. Yes. Yeah. So this has always been my philosophy. Don't worry about it.
Because this article did go... However, an optimum chain line for drivetrain efficiency still exists for one by. Using the cogs towards the middle of this cassette, which results in a straighter chain line, is more efficient and quieter. I paid for the whole cassette.
It's not that it's not more efficient and quieter. It is, but so and we're talking, and quieter is we're talking about an imperceptible difference in a lot of the cases.
This is why cycling can seem so intimidating.
Yeah.
When people are like, oh, but by the way, don't do this and this. Don't do this and this. The other thing is, I don't always know what what gear I'm in until my little Garmin says, "Oh, you're out." Boop.
Oh,
all done.
I do like the double beep you get when
that
when you've
says-
hit your largest cog in the back.
Which
Yeah,
obviously
you have
is-
no more gears. This is the easiest.
Which is obviously if you don't have electronic shifting, you haven't synced your Garmin. But for the most part, when I had a road bike, I probably knew what gear I was in the front.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time, I probably could not tell you what gear.
Because
I
you were
was
riding
in
by
the
feel, you
back.
weren't riding. It didn't
Right,
matter.
That's what I'm saying. So then I wouldn't necessarily, can't go one more because I might cross chain them.
The road electronic group sets with a double crank, they don't even let you go into the small cogs in the back when you're in the small chainring in the front. And that's really it's really not about cross chaining. It's more about their design, the way they had to design them. It was easier to make it so there was no chain rub on the front derailleur that way.
It's just so funny.
Yeah.
It's just, give me one more thing to be paranoid about. That I think is largely the issue in cycling and why it can come across as intimidating because, well, how tall are your socks and what color are your shoes and can you wear that color jersey and make sure you don't cross chain.
Right. Yep.
This industry. I can't even. That is amazing. Okay, speaking of chains, we got a question through the Instagram from our friend Angela about cleaning. So in addition to all the stuff we talked about with cleaning your bikes, I did a little story on your Instagram yesterday about cleaning the bike. And I was mostly doing it for our mountain bike team because I knew their bikes were probably gross. So I thought I'll just do a very quick story of the 6 steps that I take to clean my bike so that I can send it to the parents. And one of them was about making sure the chain was very dry and that we lubed it to make sure that we prevent rust. And Angela responded, what do I do about a chain that has a little bit of rust on it? So, and I'm guessing it's because she had a bike. She hasn't ridden it for a little bit.
Yep.
So it's been in the garage.
Yep.
It's not rusted.
Right.
It's brown. It's just, sometimes you get a little bit of rust on it. What do I do about that?
So
Can I still use that chain?
yeah, this is where it is, without seeing the chain, it's hard to say what is your definition of a little bit of rust.
That's true.
But there can be slight rust spots, little blotches and so forth. And you're like, oh, it's starting to rust, right?
Let's presume majority silver.
Yeah, if you can use a degreaser on that chain, and a lot of that will just kick off that very, very surface rust.
Okay.
And then lube it. Usually I like to lube it with a wet lube if there's a little bit of rust on there now. Okay. And then just sort of test it and spin it and see if it's smooth and make sure there's no kinked links, which will usually show up as a sort of a little skip or a little pop or something as it's coming around.
See, how do you know if the chain is too rusty?
Yeah, I mean, well,
is it not flexy? Is it not what would be a indicator?
Well, on that far extreme of being rusted,
round,
you basically have links that will not pivot anymore.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
That is a fully rusted chain. But if you are what you might think is a little rusty, right? And I do get customers like this, but the rust is really have started to get down into the rollers and so forth.
Okay.
You will probably, if this is a 20-year-old hybrid that they use a few times a year and they ride down the rec path and there was a little bit of rust that I kind of cleans up and so forth, but they're not really looking to spend a lot of money, and I clean it up and I put lube on it and it is running smooth.
Yep.
They're fine. All right.
Okay.
Right. So, given their expectations of the cost of the service and what they're going to use the bike for and so forth, that's fine. But I would never do the same thing on an enthusiast bike, right? There's a point of their chain with a little bit of rust where it's like, yeah, that's just, we got to change that.
Okay.
now.
So let's say it's a gravel bike that was used the year before, but because of various reasons hasn't been ridden.
Yeah, if you clean up that chain and you're running it through a rag with degreaser.
Yep.
And you're really kind of cleaning that chain with a bunch of pressure, right? So you're really scrubbing that chain. If then you say, "Oh, yeah, that looks pretty good. I really don't see any rust," you're probably fine.
Should you take it off the bike for that degreasing, or can you?
So no.
Okay.
You can, but here's the reason I'm saying no: is that most chains now use a quick link, and
yes,
that quick
we
link,
talked about that. Yep.
That quick link is not reusable. So if you want to take it off to get it clean off the bike, and you can and some people then soak their chain and so forth. That's great, but just know you need to
get a new quick
link. You need a new quick link when you put it on.
What's the worst that happens if you
unless you have a reusable one by KMC or Whipperman?
Okay.
But
what's the worst that can happen if you use a chain that's slightly too rusty?
Oh, it's just going to skip.
It's going to skip.
It's just going to skip.
It's just not going to perform.
Yeah, it's going to be.
It's going
to be noisy.
Call your bike mechanic and get a new chain.
It'll be noisy and it could skip because you'll have tight links. And, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Shifting issues and that kind of thing.
Well, there you go. Mm-hmm. Try your chain, people.
But generally, if you clean it and then you really don't see that rust anymore, you're probably fine.
Is a rusty chain inevitable if you put your bike in the basement for an extended period?
Yeah, but
I mean, can you just slather goo on it to keep it from?
Yes,
you could over.
Yeah, if you really kind of coated it in an oil that will not evaporate. So these would be a lot of wet loops, which are basically oils.
Okay.
And then you put it somewhere where it's going to be stored for a long time and where it's humid.
Yes.
Then it should be okay.
Okay.
But this is what catches a lot of people off guard, is that basements and garages and sheds can be very humid. Then so they're just putting their bike in there, and sometimes they don't touch it for a couple of years, and then, why did my chain rust? I was kept inside.
Right.
I mean, that's why chains are the most susceptible to rusting on a part of a bike. It is the most sort of bare steel, if you will, even though they're theoretically technically coated with different surface treatments and so forth.
So it's not that unusual that the chain is kind of the first thing.
Yeah. That, and then a few bolt heads.
Okay.
But inside the head, which is more cosmetic than anything.
All right.
Yep.
Well, I think that's all we have for this episode of Cycling Together. Cycling Together with Kristen and Steve is a production of Steve the Bike Guy, an independent bicycle shop in Eastern Massachusetts, and Sundin Marketing.
If you like the show, please leave a review or share with a friend. And for show notes, links, or to leave a comment, question, or topic suggestion, please visit cyclingtogether.bike. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Steve the Bike Guy.
Thank you for joining the ride.
Okay, we'll see you next time. Technical documentation on these software.
Was a hell of an
It was.
I have to edit that out.